I never imagined that a luxurious dinner at the Langford Hotel, the same venue once used for elite Wall Street celebrations, would become the turning point of my life. Beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers, with the soft clink of silverware against porcelain plates sounding like a hushed symphony, I sat among my husband's family, trying to hold a polite smile and breathe normally. It was Nathaniel Whitmore's 75th birthday, my father-in-law and the founder of the Whitmore and Langley real estate empire. The party was held in the hotel's VIP suite, with only about 10 guests, all of them Forbes Weatherly elite. I wore an elegant teal dress in a classic cut I knew wouldn't upset my mother-in-law. Around my neck was a vintage sapphire necklace that once belonged to my grandmother, Harper Grace, the woman who raised me after my parents died in an accident when I was a child. "Dear Harper," Margaret's voice, my mother-in-law, cut through the air, sweet as honey but edged with steel. "That necklace, it's lovely, but perhaps a bit too bold for a family dinner, don't you think?" I turned slightly to face her, my heart skipping a beat. The table fell silent. "James." My husband let out a faint cough as if to change the subject, but Margaret didn't miss a beat. She set her wineglass down, tilted her head with a gentle smile and continued, "I think it would be best if you placed it in the Whitmore family vault. The safe there is bank grade, and it deserves to be part of our family collection." I heard every word, so clearly it felt like they scraped down my spine like a fine blade. That necklace wasn't just jewelry, it was what my grandmother placed in my hands the day I officially took over the Eleanor Foundation. A non-profit she'd built from nothing. Before she passed, she said, "Don't let anyone turn you into a shadow. Remember, you are Harper Grace, and you have the right to shine." I pressed my lips together, my hand instinctively reaching for the sapphire at my throat. "It's not part of the Whitmore family," I said quietly but firmly. The table went still. Margaret's eyes flickered, just for a moment. James placed his hand gently over mine, so light it was almost invisible. "Mom's just trying to help, Harper. That necklace is very valuable. It would be safer in the main vault." I felt like I was sinking into ice water. They didn't see me as a wife or a rational woman, but as a stubborn child clutching a favorite toy. "That necklace is part of my family's legacy," I replied, keeping my eyes on Margaret. "Not a display piece." She let out a soft laugh, but her voice had lost all gentleness. "You're James's wife. Anything you bring into this marriage becomes Whitmore property. That's how it works." I turned to James. He avoided my gaze. "We'll talk later, Harper," he murmured. "Don't make this a big deal. Mom's only thinking of your best interest." This wasn't about the necklace. It was the final chapter in a long list of moments where I'd trimmed pieces of myself to fit into the mold they wanted. They once told me to step down as CEO because women should focus on charity and image building. They asked me to change my style, to avoid events not in line with the Whitmore brand, and I did it. All of it, for the sake of peace. But not this time. That necklace was the line, not because of its monetary worth, but because it was the last symbol of who I was before this marriage. And when Margaret's hand reached out, so casually, so entitled, I knew, if I gave it up, I'd have nothing left of myself. I clenched my fists under the table, my eyes stayed locked, my voice rang clear. "I'm sorry, Margaret, but I won't be giving it to anyone. Not tonight. Not ever." I could still feel the chill on my skin as I left the dining room, the sapphire catching the hallway lights like a quiet reminder from my grandmother that I was still here, that I hadn't been erased. Inside the elevator, my face reflected faintly in the brushed steel next to the glowing words, "Floor 17, Langford Private Suites." As the doors closed, I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the quiet fury that had simmered for 3 years. Margaret's words echoed in my mind like the toll of an old clock. "You're James's wife. Anything you bring into this marriage becomes Whitmore property." It wasn't new, it was just the first time I'd heard it without the sugarcoating of "for the greater good." 3 years ago, when I turned down the offer to lead the Boston branch of the Eleanor Foundation, the very organization my grandmother founded and I had run since I was 28, James had said, "Put family first, Harper. There'll be other chances." I believed him. I thought I was making a sacrifice for love, Then I packed away my colorful dresses and replaced them with neutral suits Margaret picked out. They looked more mature for high-level events. I thought I was learning to adapt. I still remember the last time I saw Tasha, my best friend from college, before we lost touch. She invited me to her art gallery's grand opening and I declined. Because the Whitmores had a fundraising dinner, they told me, "Connections outside the industry don't add value to your role." I told myself, there'd be another time. There wasn't. I had given up too much, and now they wanted the last piece, the sapphire, like they wanted to erase the final fragment of Harper Grace before I became James Whitmore's wife. I entered the suite, slumping into the chair by the window that overlooked Central Park. Outside, the city lights blazed as if no one had ever been swallowed by silent, ruthless expectations. I took off the necklace, placing it in my palm, watching each stone shimmer under the lamp. My grandmother used to call it her last piece of spirit. "Freedom doesn't mean doing whatever you want," she once said. "It means having the courage to do what's right, even if no one else agrees." I was 25 then, fresh out of my MBA program, standing on stage at my first appointment ceremony as executive director of the Eleanor Foundation. She looked at me with pride, then clasped the necklace around my neck with hands as steady as stone. I used to be strong like her. I used to know who I was. I used to believe nothing could strip that away. And yet here I was, sitting in a 5-star hotel dressed in things that weren't mine, dining with people who saw me as part of a curated family collection, not as a person with a mind of her own. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the platinum bracelet my grandmother gave me when I earned my master's. It looked simple, but inside was something few knew. A hidden emergency button linked to the Eleanor Foundation's private security team. My grandmother made all senior executives wear one, while traveling or meeting unknown partners. "We're not always in danger, Harper. But I want you to know, you always have the right to call for help when you feel like you're being pushed away from yourself." I'd never used it, but for the first time in 3 years I touched it, like I was reminding myself that I still had choices. I didn't press it. Not yet. But I knew I'd awakened. I stared at my reflection in the window. Not Harper of the Whitmores, but Harper Grace, granddaughter of Eleanor Grace, former head of a non-profit with branches in 5 countries, keynote speaker at Geneva. The woman who once turned down a 7-figure grant because it clashed with the foundation's values. And that woman, me, was still here. She just needed one night to remember. I clutched the necklace and the bracelet tightly, lifting my head. The city lights still shimmered, like a quiet call to rise. Tomorrow I would return to the Eleanor Foundation office. And this time no one, not even the Whitmores, could stop me. The next morning I returned to the Langford Hotel earlier than anyone else, even before the banquet hall had been cleared from the birthday party. I wasn't there to apologize. I was there to end something I had been avoiding for 3 years. The truth. The banquet room was sealed off, but a few staff members were still tidying up inside. I stood silently in front of the glass doors, my hand gently touching the pendant on my neck, searching for strength. My grandmother used to say, "There will be times when you won't win with words, you'll have to act." I never imagined that act would mean standing in a luxury hotel in a plain office dress ready to do what the women of the Whitmore family would surely call unnecessary. And then I saw them. Margaret, James, Nathaniel, and 2 of the family's attorneys, already gathered in the small conference room next to the banquet hall. As I entered, all eyes turned toward me. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Harper, James was the first to break the silence, his voice soft, trying to soothe. "Mom was just concerned. She didn't mean anything by it. You overreacted last night, unnecessarily." He responded right away. I slipped off my thin leather gloves, placed them gently on the table, then slowly sat down across from Margaret. "It wasn't about the necklace," I said, locking eyes with her sharp gaze. "It was about the attempt to strip away the last thing that still connects me to who I am." Margaret raised an eyebrow, keeping her usual calm demeanor. "Harper, you're overreacting. It's a piece of jewelry, just stone and metal." "No," I interrupted, "it's a reminder of the woman who taught me to stand on my own, to never bend to misguided expectations, of the values I used to fight for and still believe in." I lowered my eyes and gently flipped over the platinum bracelet on my wrist, pressing 2 small recessed points. No one in the room heard a sound, but I knew. The signal had been sent. I sat up straighter. I'm not here to explain myself, I'm here to draw a line, and today, I won't back down. You're calling people in? James jumped up, eyes wide. You triggered the alert over a family disagreement? I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see the man who used to comfort me in moments of weakness. What I saw was fear. Fear of losing control. It's not about a disagreement, I said calmly. It's about an attempt to undermine ownership of personal property, and I have every right to protect myself, James. The door opened. 3 people entered, dark suits, discreet earpieces. Leading them was Alyssa Tran, once my grandmother's trusted assistant and now head of executive security at the Eleanor Foundation. Petite but unshakable. She stopped just behind me and gave a slight nod. Signal received. Miss Harper, is everything secure? For now, I replied, turning to Margaret. But I won't let this happen again. What is this nonsense? Nathaniel snapped. This is your home, your family. Family doesn't erase your past, I said. They don't lay claim to someone else's legacy, and they don't ask you to lose yourself just to belong. James stepped closer and whispered in my ear, Harper, you're ruining everything. Over a necklace? I turned to him. It's not about the necklace. It's about me, and if you can't understand that, then maybe we were never truly a couple. In that moment, I didn't feel anger or fear. I felt relief. Because for the first time in 3 years, I was standing up for myself. I rose to my feet. I'll be leaving now, and no, I don't need an escort, but they'll be accompanying me, to ensure no one tries to stop me again. Margaret said nothing, but her eyes for once didn't hide the displeasure. The polished composure was cracking. I turned away, Elisa and the 2 guards quietly following. From behind I heard James's voice, barely a whisper. You're choosing to walk away from everything. I didn't look back. Because I knew I wasn't walking away from anything. I was finally reclaiming everything. I left the conference room with steady steps, the sound of my heels on marble marking the moment of change. The Eleanor Foundation security team said nothing. They knew this wasn't just an alert call, it was a dignified withdrawal. A silent declaration that I would no longer let anyone else define me. The Langford Hotel's revolving door closed behind me, separating me from the elegant room where every decision I made used to be gently redirected with smiles and soft persuasion. The late September air was brisk, but I could finally breathe. Alyssa opened the door of the black SUV waiting at the curb. Before stepping in, I turned to look at the hotel one last time. Its glossy glass facade reflected layers of dazzling light, but to me it was no longer a symbol of power. It was simply a place where I had once lost myself, and just now found my way back. The ride was silent. I took off the necklace, laid it in my palm, and gently traced the deep blue sapphire. Not because I was afraid of losing it, but because I wanted to truly see it one more time. The last gift from my grandmother. As if she were right there with me, watching in silence but never turning away. Where to, Ms. Harper? Elisa asked softly. I looked up, to the Eleanor Foundation headquarters. Her eyes lit up, but she stayed composed. Yes, ma'am. 15 minutes later, we stopped in front of the 6-story glass building on East 63rd Street. The place where I'd spent the first 5 years of my career building education programs for young women in underserved communities. Where I had pulled all-nighters drafting grant proposals to the United Nations, and the place I'd quietly walked away from after getting married, thinking I was entering a new chapter of life. Now I was back, not as an employee, not as an honorary guest, but as Harper Grace. The heir to Eleanor's legacy, not just in name, but in spirit. The security guard stood up as soon as he saw me. He recognized me instantly. Welcome back, Miss Harper. I nodded. I need access to my old office. Is anyone still upstairs? A few people on the 6th floor. I'll let them know you're coming. I walked up the stairs, every step both familiar and foreign. The hallway still displayed the paintings gifted by girls we'd once supported. The 6th floor office looked nearly the same since I'd left, except for a few small changes. A new flower vase, some chairs repositioned. But my desk was still there, empty, waiting for me. I opened the second drawer on the left, the one where I kept the first project drafts. At the bottom, the ivory envelope my grandmother left behind was still there, something I once thought I didn't have the courage to open. I took a breath and gently tore the edge. Harper, my dear, if you're reading this, it means you've reached a moment when you need to remember something. I didn't leave you a company, an organization, or a fortune. I left you a choice. The choice to become the woman you want to be, the choice to stand when you feel small, and the choice not to let love, duty, or tradition dim your light. If you're wondering whether you're doing the right thing, ask yourself this: can you still see yourself in the mirror? If yes, keep going. If not, turn around and begin again. I always believed you'd know when it was time. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the letter. And I knew. They had shifted the course of my life so subtly I hadn't even felt it. Until I almost lost everything. They called it love, tradition, support, but really, it was erasure. Not anymore. I stood, opened my laptop, and started typing an email to the full board of directors. I was resuming leadership effective tomorrow, with full executive authority. Then I picked up the phone and called my grandmother's longtime attorney, appointed as legal advisor to the Eleanor Foundation. I need a full audit of current executive powers, and a report on every grant that's been stalled over the past 3 years. I want it all within 48 hours. On the other end, he simply replied, "Welcome back." I looked out the window. The city was still noisy, still chaotic. But inside me there was a calm nothing could break. For the first time in 3 years, I no longer felt like James Whitmore's wife. I returned to the main office of the Eleanor Foundation on Monday morning, carrying not just determination but a growing suspicion about everything that had happened during the 3 years I was away. The Manhattan headquarters still stood tall amid the sleek architecture around it, a reminder of my grandmother's bold vision. The glass dome reflected the early sunlight, the reception area carried the faint scent of white orchids, and familiar faces greeted me with smiles, half surprised, half hopeful. "Miss Harper, it's really good to have you back," one of the receptionists said softly. I nodded, saying little. In my mind, I was piecing together the red flags: strange calls, delayed financial reports, abruptly suspended programs that had been thriving just a year ago, and most of all, my own silence, orchestrated by reasons that had once seemed so logical, I never thought to question them. I headed straight to the 8th floor, the highest executive level, once declared off-limits after I got married. James used to say, "Harper, let the professionals manage. You already have enough on your plate." Back then I believed him. Not anymore. Alyssa was already waiting in my office. She placed a brand new laptop in front of me, equipped with triple-layer security, only accessible via biometric verification, and a private code my grandmother had created 3 years ago. "Are you ready?" Alyssa asked. I nodded. "Let's begin." As the system interface launched, I navigated straight to the internal operations audit. Data flooded the screen. Hundreds of emails, memos, financial documents, and within them the irregularities were chillingly clear. First, the executive email account under my name had been auto-routed to a secondary address, hosted on a subdomain managed by a company affiliated with Whitmore Holdings. Meaning, every email sent to me, documents, reports, even internal meeting invites, was intercepted and filtered. I only saw what they wanted me to see. Second, in the internal documentation system, at least 4 files carried my digital signature. Documents I had never seen, let alone signed. One of them, reassigned the Southeast Asia Regional Director, personally appointed by my grandmother, to an unpaid advisory role, replaced by someone from the Whitmore Financial Network. I leaned back, a chill running down my spine. "Keep going," I told Alyssa. "Check meeting logs for the last 18 months. A long list appeared. At least 8 board meetings were recorded with my attendance, even though I knew I hadn't been at any of them. On February 18 of last year, during a quarterly budget review, I had been in Palm Springs attending a charity gala with Margaret. Elisa glanced at me silently. I simply nodded. "I want to see the video footage of those meetings." She typed a command sequence, and there it was. A video clip showing a Harper seated, nodding through the meeting but saying nothing. The face resembled mine, the outfit was one I owned, but the eyes? Vacant. The camera angle was blurry, just enough to pass for me at a glance. I leaned closer to the screen. "That's not me," I whispered. They used a deep fake. Or edited clips from real meetings, Alyssa added. We'll verify through metadata analysis and timestamp checks. Dizziness hit me. I gripped the arms of the chair to steady my breath. There was no doubt now. Whitmore Holdings had systematically hijacked my grandmother's foundation, using my name, my title, and my silence as their cover. Quietly. Step by step. So subtly I hadn't seen it until it was almost too late. I looked at Elisa. Do I still hold any legal authority? She nodded. You're still the legal heir and sole controlling stakeholder of the Eleanor Foundation. Everything they've done hinged on your lack of objection. Now that you're objecting, their legal standing collapses. I stood, eyes catching the morning sun spilling through the windows. Then, it's time we start over, I said, voice firm as steel. Call an emergency board meeting. Elisa smiled. You want the central conference room? I shook my head. No, I want the Eleanor room. The first meeting space my grandmother ever designed, with floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the city square. Where she once said, if you're going to speak the truth, let the world see it. I stepped out of the office, no more doubts, no more hesitation. I came to reclaim what was mine. The emergency meeting was held at 10 a.m., the next day in the Eleanor room. Bathed in natural light, the very place where my grandmother once unveiled the strategies that turned the Eleanor Foundation from a local nonprofit into a global force. Today, it would be where I made my official stand. 11 people attended, 5 board members, 3 attorneys from Harper & Dune, the CFO, the COO, and Alyssa. No one spoke when I walked in. They had all read the midnight report I sent, a 47-page document including video clips, access logs, and 3 forged signature samples. I stood at the head of the table, my hand resting lightly on the sapphire pendant. Thank you for coming on such short notice, I began, scanning the room. I believe the documents I sent make it clear this is no longer an internal matter. Sophia Lang, a senior board member and one of my grandmother's closest allies, nodded. We've reviewed everything. It's clear this was a coordinated power grab. Attorney Ethan Graves stood. We've confirmed. The 3 signatures in the system were forged. 2 meeting dates were falsified. Routing internal email to an external server violates the Foundation's core charter. And the party behind all of this, I continued, lowering my voice, is Whitmore Holdings. A wave of silence passed through the room. No one was surprised, but everyone waited for something that hadn't happened in 3 years, for me to name names. James Whitmore and a team within his financial network gradually seized operational control of this foundation. They used my name, my title, and my silence to legitimize their actions. I turned to the CFO. Mason, how many accounts were manipulated? Mason exhaled and glanced at his screen. 8 primary accounts and 3 reserves. Around $18 million, 0 cents, was redirected, mostly toward shell companies affiliated with Whitmore Holdings. I nodded. Then that's where we begin. I signaled Alyssa, who tapped a command sequence into her tablet. All accounts are now being frozen, she reported. Transactions halted immediately. Access privileges have been reset. Going forward, only 3 people can approve activity. Me, Harper, and Mason. Sophia looked uneasy. Should we notify Whitmore that we're investigating? I looked directly at her. No, we won't notify them. Because this isn't a warning, this is a reclamation. I turned to Ethan. Next steps? We've drafted suspensions for all third-party contracts introduced by Whitmore. Legal notices will be issued requiring James and other involved parties to respond before formal litigation begins. What about the internal systems? I asked. Alyssa replied, We've begun restoring control across all global branches. High-level security is reactivated. All login activity now requires multi-layer authentication and video capture. I looked up at the large screen at the end of the room displaying the Eleanor Foundation logo. A lantern burning in the dark symbolizing light in the bleakest moments. For 3 years I let myself be controlled. I called it sacrifice, responsibility, love, I said, voice steady. But the truth is, I was absent when this organization needed me most. I stepped forward and laid my hand on the table. I can't undo what's been done, but I can ensure that from today no one will impersonate me/education budgets to invest in real estate, or hand leadership to those who never understood this foundation's mission. Silence. I looked around, gaze unwavering. I want every person in this room to understand. We're not just restoring a system. We're saving a legacy, and I will not compromise again. Outside, the sky brightened, casting glittering reflections across the glass walls. But the light I felt didn't come from the city. It came from the place my grandmother always said was the strongest, the heart of someone brave enough to do what's right, even if it comes late. I never expected to see my name on the front page of the Chronicle under a sensational headline. Leadership Crisis at Eleanor Foundation, Family Rift at the Core. The article never named James or the Whitmore family directly, but each line clearly implied that I, a woman described as emotional and unmoored after a failed marriage, was no longer fit to run a global organization. I wasn't surprised. They were doing exactly what I predicted, leveraging the media, masking a power struggle as a matter of organizational image, and planting rumors about my mental instability. They didn't just want control. They wanted me discredited, isolated, and if possible, erased entirely from my grandmother's legacy. I had just folded the printout when my phone rang. "Vivian Whitmore is waiting for you on the 10th floor, Alyssa said, her tone cautious. "She's alone." I leaned back in my chair. It was time. "Bring her to the glass room," I replied. "That space is transparent enough." The glass room, top floor of the building where my grandmother used to meet with international partners, offered a full view of the city. Nothing to hide and nowhere to hide. The perfect place for those too used to operating behind closed doors. When I walked in, Vivian was already there, resting a hand on the railing, eyes fixed on the Manhattan skyline. "Beautiful view," she said without turning. "Harper, thank you for agreeing to meet privately." I kept my distance. "I don't see this as a personal meeting, Vivian." She turned, a faint smile on her lips but eyes cold as steel. "We're both reasonable women. I think we can find a way forward that doesn't hurt anyone else." I looked straight at her. People get hurt when others stay silent and let decisions be made for them. Vivian stepped closer and placed a leather bag on the glass table in the center of the room. "Harper, you know, James still wants to save this marriage, but things are getting out of hand. The media's involved. Our partners are starting to worry." I crossed my arms. "And you're here to do what? Offer some kind of reconciliation for the sake of the foundation?" Vivian smiled, this time with a trace more sincerity. "I'm proposing a new structure. You stay on as CEO, keep the image, represent the values of the Eleanor Foundation, but the executive board would be directly supported by an authorized group of Whitmore Holdings advisors." "So I'd be a figurehead?" I asked, not bothering to hide my contempt. "No, not at all." She blinked, feigning confusion. "You'd be the face of the foundation, the inspirational presence. The actual operations should be handled by people with financial expertise. It's more practical." I stayed silent for a moment, then opened my tablet and played back an audio clip from the emergency board meeting. Ethan Graves' voice came through. "We have sufficient evidence to file charges for forgery, system tampering, and unauthorized fund redirection." As the recording ended, I looked up. "Vivian, you know something? In the 3 years I spent as your daughter-in-law, I learned one thing from you. If someone smiles while taking everything from you, they're not here to reconcile, they're here to negotiate." She tightened her grip on her bag strap. "I hope you're not misunderstanding our family's intentions." "Oh no," I replied, voice low but firm. "I understand them perfectly. Your family wants reputation, money, and control. But they don't care about what my grandmother built. They only care about how to exploit it." The air thickened for a few seconds. Vivian exhaled and stepped back. "If you choose a path of confrontation, no one wins, Harper. We have friends in the industry, shareholders, influence." I walked to the window and looked up at the sky. "You might have influence in New York, Vivian, but the Eleanor Foundation operates on 4 continents. And my grandmother didn't build it with dinner parties and handshakes. She built it with trust and principles." I turned back, my gaze steady. "If there's anything more to discuss, let our lawyers handle it. And if you're here to convince me to step down, I'm sorry, Harper Grace is no longer the woman who sits quietly while others decide her life." Vivian pressed her lips together, retrieved her bag, her expression shifting, no more polished smile, just the look of someone realizing the power dynamic had changed. "Then, we'll see where this goes," she said, voice quiet but cold. I didn't reply, just nodded slightly and opened the door to see her out. As the door closed behind her, I stood still for a few seconds, my fingers brushing against the sapphire bracelet on my wrist. A week after the confrontation with Vivian Whitmore, social media and mainstream press were still buzzing about the leadership crisis at the Eleanor Foundation. But what they didn't know was that my international communications team and I had quietly prepared our next move. And this time, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. The meeting took place in the Foundation's global media floor, once used for a major campaign on women's education 6 years ago. Today, it hosted representatives from the Foundation's 5 key regions: North America, Europe, South America, Southeast Asia, and Africa. Also in attendance were journalists from The Guardian, Forbes Impact, Le Monde Économique, and Bloomberg Ethics Weekly, publications known not just for financial coverage, but for highlighting global business ethics. We call it the Whitmore method, I began, my voice calm and clear, a refined model passed through generations, entering family-owned organizations through marriage, gradually assuming control and restructuring leadership to serve their financial interests. On the screen, a complex web of connections lit up, showing links between Whitmore Holdings and 7 nonprofits and 4 businesses quietly acquired over the past decade, all with the same pattern: family-rooted brands, once full of identity and history. And then, within years, the founders disappeared from the board, leadership was renamed, and all cash flow redirected to opaque subsidiaries. I emphasized, they don't take power all at once, they influence slowly, through advice, family meetings, and finally the wife's signature. Bloomberg immediately requested a deep dive feature. The Guardian asked for access to the internal financial files we had gathered. I nodded. We'll provide all the necessary documentation. But more important than the evidence is the narrative. This isn't just a power abuse case. It's a warning about how business ethics can be distorted behind the veil of family. After the meeting, I recorded a global statement. I'm Harper Grace. I am not only the CEO of the Eleanor Foundation, but the heir to a vision of a world where human value is not dictated by power or marriage. Recently, there have been rumors and articles portraying me as emotional, unstable, unable to lead. But I am here with full transparency and accountability to say, we will never bow to any system that values manipulation over trust. The statement aired across all of the Foundation's platforms and was translated into 8 languages. Our PR team sent a full press kit to over 200 international journalists. Within 48 hours, the hashtag #HarperSpeaksOut was trending globally in the top 10. And it wasn't just the international community responding. Partners who had withdrawn under pressure from the Whitmores began reaching out again. An investment fund in Norway sent confirmation to resume funding for the STEM for Girls campaign in Africa. A Canadian nonprofit announced plans to expand its partnership on rural education data research. But the message that struck me most was from the former deputy CEO of a company once taken over by the Whitmores, a woman named Amelia Nunez. I went through exactly what you're facing now. They used family ties to push me out, then rewrote the company's history. You did what I never had the courage to do. You spoke up. And that doesn't just protect the Eleanor Foundation, it's a signal for so many other women. Thank you. I read her message over and over late at night, long after the office lights had dimmed. I thought of my grandmother, the woman who started this foundation with nothing but an old wooden desk and a dream, to build something no one could take, not even those with ties, money, or marriage. She was right. We can't stop people from trying to steal legacies, but we can expose them with the light of truth. And this time that light didn't come from sensational headlines. It came from real people, allies, communities, and those who had once been silent but were now ready to rise. I turned off the screen and told myself, the legal battle is just beginning. But in the eyes of the public, the Eleanor Foundation is no longer the victim of a family dispute. It's become a new symbol of moral strength, restoration, and truth. 3 days after the global broadcast, Montgomery's legal team officially filed a petition in Philadelphia court to freeze the foundation's financial operations, citing serious governance conflicts and risk of organizational asset mismanagement. A familiar tactic, intimidating, and especially effective in a local system where they had deep ties, from the judiciary to commercial banks. but I had anticipated that move. That same morning, I signed off on transferring all core operational accounts to 3 international branches: Zurich, Singapore, and Toronto. Jurisdictions known for transparency and insulated from U.S. domestic influence. The transition was carried out swiftly and quietly, under the direction of the International Finance Unit my grandmother personally established. Operational grant and reserve funds have been secured, Mason reported by day's end. Even if the temporary freeze is approved, they won't be able to touch the main cash flow. I exhaled relieved, but I knew defense wasn't enough. If I wanted long-term protection, I had to do something no one in my family had ever dared. Step outside the elite world where Montgomery controlled every boardroom, and into the real world, where real value is built through action. I chose to start in the very place Montgomery never saw as a priority market: Philadelphia's working-class communities and grassroots organizations. On Saturday afternoon, I went to a community center in Fishtown, a neighborhood once industrial now rebounding with urban revitalization. I wore a simple button-down shirt, sneakers, and brought no security, just Alyssa and Natalie, our community outreach lead. We weren't there to make speeches, we were there to listen. In the small meeting hall, I sat with 20 local nonprofit leaders, from scholarship groups for immigrant students to single mother support programs. A man in his 50s, Carlton, from the local employment center, spoke plainly. "I remember Montgomery promising us money to renovate a workshop. Then they turned it into an art gallery no one here could afford. If you're just here for a photo op, save it." I looked him in the eye. "I'm not here to promise, I'm here to sign." I pulled out a prepared contract, transferring $500,000 0 cents from the Eleanor Foundation to a workforce training and reskilling project in Fishtown, with full control handed to the local leadership board. No conditions. No branding, no slogans. Carlton turned it over in his hands. Not a loan package? No PR reporting? I shook my head. Just use the funds, right? After a moment of silence, the room broke into applause. Not loud or flashy, but real, because they'd grown tired of empty promises and expensive suits and polished smiles. That day, my team and I launched 3 more local hubs in West Philly, Germantown and South Street. At each one, we came not to preach but to collaborate. To listen to real needs, find real solutions, and commit to real support, without corporate language. Montgomery didn't see it coming. They'd mastered boardrooms. But I was stepping into the soul of a city they'd always treated as a pawn, not a living community. 3 weeks later, the Philadelphia Tribune, an outlet independent from local financial circles, ran an editorial titled "When Trust Doesn't Come from Power, but Presence," with a photo of me in a tech workshop, shirt smudged with grease, smiling next to a 13-year-old girl who'd just built her first 3D printer. Not the photo I was used to, but the one I needed. My strategy had changed. I was no longer trying to fight on Montgomery's turf. I was redefining the playing field. And for the first time in 3 years, I saw it clearly. I wasn't just protecting my grandmother's legacy, I was continuing it. In my own way. That morning, I walked into the main auditorium of the Wharton School, where the annual Global Business Ethics Conference was being held, wearing a sapphire blue suit, simple but strong, just like who I'd become. No longer the soft-spoken, agreeable Harper Grace from 3 years ago, but a woman who had learned how to stand her ground amid invisible pressure. Professor Thomas Green, the program director, greeted me backstage. "Harper?" he smiled. "Everyone's looking forward to hearing from you." I offered a small smile, steadying my breath. Behind the velvet curtain, more than 300 people from around the world were waiting, not just scholars and MBA students, but startup founders from India, NGO leaders from Nairobi, financial advisors from Berlin, and central bank delegates from Chile. They weren't here for a polished speech. They were here for the truth. My name echoed through the mic. Applause followed. I stepped onto the modest wooden stage in the vast hall, the light catching the platinum bracelet on my wrist, a gift from my grandmother when I was appointed executive director at 29. I opened my laptop, then shut off the slides. No presentation needed, just me and the story. "I used to think power was something you could see," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. "A corner office, a title on a business card, a signature on a contract. But after 3 years at the top and 3 months on the edge of losing everything, I realized real power isn't what shows on the outside. It's what we believe we must obey on the inside. I paused, letting my eyes scan the room. People don't strip your power by shouting that you're not worthy, they do it by praising you as perfect, beloved, or dependable, as long as you stay inside the lines they drew for you. A young woman in the front row nodded, eyes glassy. I recognized that look. I once wore it, sitting quietly beside James in board meetings where I was expected to smile, nothing more. I lived in a kind of invisible prison for 3 years. Gentle expectations, concern disguised as advice. Every decision filtered through one question: does this fit the role others chose for me? I spoke about the Whitmore method, how they silently embedded people, rewrote company history, and redefined even the founder's identity, through nothing more than the heir's silence. But one day, I said slowly, resting my hand on the sapphire stone, I touched this bracelet and asked myself, if I disappeared today, would anyone remember who I really was, beyond the name on legal documents? The auditorium was silent. I chose to speak up, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I knew that staying silent any longer would mean losing my real voice. I described the first board meeting after we gathered the evidence, the way I looked straight at those who had forged my name and said, I'm not your figurehead anymore. I'm the one leading. I don't claim to be a role model, I concluded, but if anyone here has ever shrunk themselves to fit a frame someone else built, remember this. Real power isn't given to you. It's reclaimed, the moment you believe you deserve it. As I stepped down from the stage, the entire room rose in a standing ovation. It wasn't the kind of polite applause people give out of courtesy. It felt like something being returned to me, something I had given, something they needed too. Professor Green shook my hand again, firmer this time. You didn't just inspire, Harper, he said softly. You just redefined power for the post-globalization world. That afternoon, Financial Ethics published the full transcript of my speech. The hashtag Invisible Power trended across LinkedIn and Twitter. Business leaders, Wharton alumni, even strangers I'd never met, sent notes of thanks, messages, and invitations to collaborate. And me, I didn't feel celebrated. I felt heard. For the first time, I wasn't walking in my grandmother's shadow, or under the name someone's wife. I walked in my own name. And each step, though quiet, echoed louder than any forum Montgomery had ever manipulated. 3 months after that speech, I returned to the Eleanor Foundation headquarters on a quiet autumn morning. Philadelphia was damp, golden with falling leaves, as if the entire city was easing into a peaceful new chapter after the storm. My office was unchanged, the old mahogany desk that once belonged to Elena, the crooked painting of her laughing among children in Africa, and the worn leather chair with a small tear in the backrest. I still hadn't repaired it, as a reminder that even the strongest things have their scars. I sat down and opened a small wooden box my grandmother had left behind. Inside was a second sapphire bracelet, a perfect replica made when I was 16 but never given to me. A handwritten note was tucked beneath. For the day you understand that living by your values will never be the easiest path, but it will be the only one worth living. I sat still, then chuckled softly. She had prepared for everything. She didn't leave me heirlooms to preserve, she left me choices. To live with them or not. And now I understood. The Eleanor Foundation still stands, but not as it was. We restructured leadership, removed every figure tied to Montgomery, and rebuilt an independent oversight system. Transparent, multi-layered but flexible. Programs frozen for 3 years were revived. Our international branches now connect directly, no intermediaries. I also formally cut all financial ties with Whitmore Holdings. A few domestic banks responded by reducing credit lines, but our global network was strong enough to withstand it. I didn't just reclaim the organization. I reignited the spirit my grandmother had breathed into it from the start. No one calls me James's ex-wife in the press anymore. No one labels me the young CEO who inherited her title. They use my full name now. Harper Grace. The woman who rebuilt a legacy that almost vanished. But the biggest shift didn't come from media. It came from the faces I see every day. Young female engineers in Nairobi sending reports via Zoom with bright, determined eyes. A single mother in Fishtown writing a handwritten letter to thank us for helping her find confidence again through a training program. And a little girl in Thailand sending a video. I want to be like Miss Harper one day, not afraid when someone says, "You can't do that." I realized real power doesn't come from your name, your wealth, or your high-rise office. It comes from your ability to build, to protect, and to live by your values, even when no one's standing beside you. It lives in small, repeated choices, made every day. To not compromise, to not stay silent, and to never let anyone else define who you are. One late afternoon, I walked through the city park where my grandmother used to take me as a child. The wind was soft, the sky was quiet. I sat on our familiar wooden bench and placed my hand on the sapphire bracelet. A little girl, maybe 7, with curly hair and rosy cheeks, ran past. She turned, glanced at me, and smiled. Not because she recognized me, but because, sometimes, a stranger smiles at life. I smiled back. No title needed. No battle left to win. Just the quiet knowing I had stepped out of the shadows on my own 2 feet. And the light I now walk in, it no longer belongs to anyone else's legacy. It comes from the woman I chose to become. Harper's story isn't just a fight to reclaim a foundation. It's a powerful reminder that each of us holds the right to define our own worth. In today's world where status and power often overshadow truth, Harper showed that the greatest strength doesn't come from how others see you, but from living true to your values, even when the world tries to push you the other way. What do you think of Harper's journey, and how she protected her family's legacy? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories about family, choice, and the strength we carry within.